Reincarnational pasts are known to you here, and if some personal malady cannot be solved from A1, you may go to A2, discovering that it originated from another existence. This state is distinguished by a slower breathing pattern, and unless other directions are given, by a somewhat lowered temperature and longer alpha waves, a slower frequency. There is still relation to environment, however, and awareness of it. This may be purposely blocked off for greater efficiency, but it is not necessary. In many cases, the eyes may be open, for example, though it may be easier to close them. Here, sensitivity is quickened. Without necessarily following the methods given in A1, the mental, physical, and feeling aspects of past personality will appear. They may be perceived in various ways according to the characteristics of the individual who is in this state. This can be used to discover the origin of an idea in the past, or to find anything that has been lost there, as long as it is within your probability system. Directly beneath this is A3. You have an extension again here dealing with mass issues, movements of land, the history of your planet as you know it, the knowledge of the races that inhabited it, the history of the animals, the layers of gas and coal, and of the various ages that swept across the planet and changed it. A4 brings you to a level that is beneath matter formations, a level in which ideas and concepts can be perceived, although their representations do not appear in the present physical reality that you know. From this layer, many of the deepest inspirations come. These ideas and concepts, having their own electromagnetic identity, nevertheless appear as the symbolic landscape at this level of consciousness. This is difficult to explain. The thoughts do not appear as pseudo-images, for example, or assume any pseudo-materialization, yet they are felt vividly, perceived and picked up by portions of the brain, those seemingly unused portions for which science has found no answer. These ideas and concepts obviously came from consciousness. However, they represent incipient, latent developments that may or may not occur in physical reality. They may or may not be perceived by any given individual. The characteristic interest and abilities of the personality involved will have much to do with his recognition of the realities within this layer of consciousness. The material available, however, represents building blocks for many probable systems. It is an open area into which many other dimensions have access. It often becomes available in sleep states. Complete innovations, world-shattering inventions, these all lie waiting, so to speak, in this huge reservoir. Strong personal, quote-unquote, conversions are often effected from this level. Now, any individual can pass through these levels and remain relatively untouched and unaware, can travel through them unperceiving. The overall intentions and characteristics of the personality will determine the quality of perception and understanding. The material mentioned is available in each of the levels of consciousness given, but it must be sought out, either through conscious desire or strong unconscious desire. If it is not, then the gifts available and the potentials simply remain unused and unclaimed. The states of consciousness merge also, one into the other, and it is obvious that I am using the terms of depth to make the discussion easier. Starting with the ego or waking consciousness as the outer self focused toward exterior reality, these states are broad, more like planes to be explored. Each one, therefore, opens its great adjacent areas also, and there are many quote-unquote paths to be taken according to your interest and desire. As your ordinary waking state perceives an entire universe of physical data, so each of these other states of consciousness perceive realities as complicated, varied, and vivid. It is for this reason that it is so difficult to explain the experiences possible within any given one. A5 opens up a dimension in which the vital consciousness of any personality can at least theoretically be contacted. This involves communicating not only with past personalities in your terms, but future ones. It is a level of consciousness very seldom reached. It is not, for example, the layer used by most mediums. It is a meeting ground in which personalities from any time or place or probable system can communicate with each other in clear terms understood by all. Since past, present, and future do not exist, this is a level of crystal clear communication of consciousness. Those involved have an excellent knowledge of their own backgrounds and histories, of course, but in this state possess also a much larger perspective, in which private and historical backgrounds are seen as a portion of a greater perceivable whole. At this level, messages literally flash through the centuries, from one great man or woman to another. The future speaks to the past. The great artists have always been able to communicate at this level, and while living, literally operated at this level of consciousness a good deal of the time. Only the most exterior portions of their personalities bowed to the dictates of historical period. For those who reach the state and utilize it, communication is clearest. It must be understood that this communication works in both ways. Leonardo da Vinci knew of Picasso, for example. There are great men and women who go unknown. Their contemporaries ignore them. Their achievement may be misunderstood or physically lost, but at this level of consciousness, they share in these communications, and at another level of existence, their achievements are recognized. I do not mean to imply, however, that only the great share in this communication of consciousness. A great simplicity is necessary, and out of this, many of the most lowly in men's terms also share in these communications. There is an unending conversation going on throughout the universe, and a most meaningful one. Those from both your past and your future have a hand in your present world, and at this level the problems that have been met and will be encountered are being discussed. This is the heart of communication. It is most usually encountered either in a protective deep level of sleep or in a sudden spontaneous trance state. Now, the information received in any of these states of consciousness must be interpreted for the normal waking consciousness if any physical memory is to be maintained. In many cases, memory remains unconscious as far as the waking self is concerned, but the experiences themselves can completely change the structure of an individual life. Disastrous courses can be averted through such intercommunications and illuminations, whether or not the ego is aware of them. The experiences at these various levels may be interpreted symbolically. They may appear in the form of fantasy, fiction, or artwork, without the conscious self realizing their origin. Now, at any of these various stages of consciousness, other phenomena may also be perceived. Thought forms, for example, energy manifestations, projections from the personal subconscious, and projections from the collective unconscious. Any or all of these may take symbolic form, and may appear beneficial or threatening according to the attitude of the personality involved. They should be regarded as quite natural phenomena, often neutral in intent. Often, they are incipient forms given activity by the personality who encounters them. The nature of their activity, therefore, will be projected outward from the personality onto the relatively passive materialization. The person encountering these has only to turn his attention away to quote-unquote deactivate the phenomenon. This does not mean that the phenomenon is not real. Its nature is simply of a different kind and degree. It has some energy of its own, but needs additional energy from a perceiver for any interrelationship to take place. If such a materialization appears threatening, then simply wish it peace and withdraw your attention from it. It draws its main activating energy from your focusing and according to the intensity and nature of your focus. You must not take the root assumptions of physical existence with you as you journey through these levels of consciousness. Divest yourself of as many of them as possible, for they can cause you to misinterpret your experiences. There are other layers of awareness beneath this one, but here there is a much greater tendency for one to merge into the other. In the next level, for example, communication is possible with various kinds of consciousness that have never been physically manifested in your terms. Personalities who do not have a physical reality in either your present or future, yet who are connected with your system of reality, both as guardians and custodians. Almost all experiences from this level will be symbolically represented, for otherwise they would have no meaning to you. The experiences will all have to do in one way or another with non-physical life, non-corporeal consciousness and forms, and the independence of consciousness from matter. These experiences will always be supportive. Out-of-body experiences will often be involved here, in which the projectionist finds himself in an unearthly environment or one of great beauty and grandeur. The quote-unquote stuff of the environment will have its origin in the mind of the projectionist, being symbolic of his idea, for example, of life after death. A speaker or speakers will appear in whatever guise will be most acceptable to the projectionist, whether it be the guise of a god, an angel, or a disciple. This is the most characteristic kind of experience from this level. According to the abilities and understanding of the projectionist, however, more thorough messages can be given, and it may be quite obvious that the speakers are indeed only symbols of greater identities. Some will be able to understand the communications more clearly. The true nature of the non-physical speakers may then be made known. Deeper projections into that environment may then be possible. In this state also, great vistas of historic pasts and futures may be seen. All of these levels of consciousness are filled with the tapestry of various communications, that can be followed through according to the purpose of the personality involved. Molecular structures send out their own messages, and unless you are tuned in to perceive them, they may be interpreted as static or meaningless noise. Any one of these levels of consciousness can be covered in a twinkling, and no notice taken of it, or, at least theoretically, you could spend a lifetime exploring any given level. You may have several quite valid experiences in level 4, for example, without any awareness of the first 3. The stages are there for those who know what they are and how to use them. Many quite spontaneously find their own way. The other adjacent levels on the horizontal line now involve you in various alternate realities, each one a greater distance from your own. Many of these involve systems in which life and death as you know it does not occur, where time is felt as weight, systems in which the root assumptions are so different from your own that you would only accept any experience as fantasy. For this reason, you are much less apt to travel in those directions. In some, there are built-in impediments. Even projection from your universe into a universe of antimatter is most difficult, for example. The electromagnetic makeup even of your thoughts would be adversely affected, and yet theoretically this is possible from one of these adjacent levels of consciousness.